being very proactive with what I would call like aha moments of insight with the CEO. So that means that like you're not waiting for the company or the CEO to like identify something and come to you. You're actively looking through your strategy, through your data, and getting insights that really unleash some sort of knowledge that you can bring out to the CEO and really highlight that like, okay, you have a very good grasp and understanding of where the business stands. You have the ability to go in. I like to think that the heads of marketing, they really should be like the best analysts on their teams if needed, or be able to direct the team to really be able to find those insights.
Welcome to CMOs Unscripted. This is real talk with today's top marketing leaders. No filters, no fluff, as we promise every 2 weeks. Just bold insights and honest conversations that really cut through the noise. I'm Lisa Martin. Today's episode is going to focus on managing up to the CEO and the board as a marketing leader. My guest and I will explore how marketing can and should be demonstrating marketing's value to these leaders. Rico Andrade is my guest, the current general manager of commercial at Celigo. Rico and I go way back. He's a seasoned tech exec with a really strong background in, get this, marketing, sales, and computer science. I love that. What a great combination. Rico is also a renowned thought leader in iPaaS. That's Integration Platform as a Service, in case anyone doesn't know that. He's also got a really proven track record of driving growth and innovation in the industry. Rico, it's great to see you again. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It's good to be here.
My pleasure. Tell the audience a little bit more about you. I mentioned marketing, sales, CS. Give us a little bit more detail.
Yeah. I ended up in marketing through a circuitous route. My background is computer science.
Yeah.
But in the marketing capacity, I've been at Celigo for almost 8 years. And I came in when Celigo was at a very early stage as a VP of marketing. And I was VP of marketing at Celigo for many years. And eventually we brought in a Fortune 500 CMO, in which then I focused on more of branding and related areas. But more recently, I've kind of expanded my role, became general manager of commercial segment here at Celigo, and also own the all our partnerships and channel alliances team as well. So it's been a huge learning experience. Everything I think I know about marketing and sales and everything else I've learned here at Celigo, and I just love being a part of it.
I think on-the-job learning is probably some of the best experience you can get. I come from NASA. I had no experience in tech 20 years ago when I got into tech. I sold them on, in the life sciences, you take really complex scientific concepts and you translate them into stories. And it's not unlike what we do in marketing. So I'm with you on kind of coming in and in a circuitous route. But ultimately, what we want to talk about today, guys, is as a CMO, as a marketing leader, which Rico has been, two of the most critical relationships that you're going to have are with your CEO and the board. So in this episode, I've got Rico on here with me to really explore how to manage up effectively to maximize your relationship and get the most out of these crucial stakeholders. So Rico, let's go ahead and dive right in and talk about really kind of our first topic, which is understanding the CEO's expectations, the board's expectations. You're a leader in marketing, you're a leader in commercial. How do you go about learning the key priorities and goals of the CEO and the board and adapt them to your role? What's that process like?
Yeah, I hopefully, anyone who is, going into leadership role on the marketing side has had deep conversations with, both the CEO and board members. And if not, it should be, an important part of the discovery process pretty early on in your job. So, strong recommendation that, you get a complete, you do a discovery session, similar to what you would on, your like in the sales process, to really truly understand like what is the perceived pain, what is their understanding of what you're trying to solve, and obviously they probably hired you for a reason, where you're going to bring some insight and expertise that they can't necessarily, they don't have the subject matter expertise to be able to drive that, but they still hired you for a particular reason. So it's very, very important to make sure that you have a detailed understanding through this discovery process and one-on-one conversations and, historical documentation and so on, so that you make sure that, the things that you're planning are very, very closely aligned with, what their expectations are in the first place.
Yeah. So that discovery phase, you say it sounds like it's very foundational to the role. When, in your expertise, when you're engaging with the CEOs and boards, what are some of their key concerns and priorities when it comes to marketing in B2B organizations?
Yeah, and I would definitely distinguish, separate out the CEO from the board itself, because the CEO, typically speaking, if they got into kind of the CEO point, they probably have a much deeper grasp of nuances and the business itself, and they're probably very passionate about it, and you can go probably into a level of detail that you don't want to go into with the board unless there's someone on the board that is specifically brought on board as, let's say, a marketing expert. So for example, we do have a CMO on our board, and, it's important to spend time with him specifically, to make sure that, he is fully up to speed and, sees the vision of marketing and so on. But generally speaking, the board is likely most interested, depending on what your KPIs are, at the high level pipeline and revenue targets, at making sure that the programs are efficient, that you're doing that, with a fairly controlled CAC, and that, it may differ, like some cases, companies, for example, it may be more on customer acquisition, market penetration and so on.
Yeah.
But typically speaking, it's kept at, at like that high level of, like what are the main things that they're looking for. The CEO, it's probably in your interest to, go quite a bit, more detail, because yes, they're interested in the same things that the board is, but they need a bit more of the completeness of the story to understand and to really internalize the message that you're ultimately going to give to the board. And so in this case, it's much more likely that the CEO is going to want to understand the broader vision. They're going to want to understand some of the leading indicators, website traffic, perhaps some of the fuzzier metrics around, PR and, share of voice. And so on. And, they'll have a lot of questions for it. But if the CEO has a fuller picture of the story, he can become your ally as well when you're presenting that information to the board. And that's absolutely what you want. You want to be able to go hand in hand as a cohesive story, when we're presenting to the board.
Absolutely. That collaborative relationship that you just described with the CEO is critical, that you can go deeper with them on pipeline revenue, vision, strategy, some of the other KPIs like PR, share of voice. But from a board perspective, unless there's a CMO on the board, which some companies have, some don't, you want to be a bit of a higher level. But I think ultimately showing what's the value that marketing is delivering to the business. And I think that's where revenue comes in. What are some of the shortcomings that you've seen from marketing leaders in communicating with CEOs and boards that you would recommend folks, hey, if you're falling into these traps, here's how you can circumnavigate them?
Yeah, I think the main thing is be really, really careful about vanity metrics at the board level, especially. You always want to be careful about vanity metrics. But I'll say one thing, at the board level, like I would never recommend someone go in to, with MQL numbers unless there's a very compelling reason. At the board level, that's a precursor to what they're really interested in. Which is the revenue targets usually on the B2B side, unless, like I mentioned, it's more on, customer acquisition, penetration, or management of expenses and so on. But the second thing I think that's super important is, make sure you know your numbers and you know your business, because even if you don't necessarily, like, it's not the highlighted thing that you are going to present, it's very, very important that you have just a complete solid understanding of those numbers and can back up and justify it, when the time comes. I mean, I can't emphasize that enough. The last thing you want to do is, be surprised about something. And certainly it means that, like, you don't make up numbers that, if you don't know the answer, you can be open and honest and transparent about that. But for the most part, if there's something that can be known, make sure that you really take the time to, grok it at your organization. And then finally, I would say that make sure that you can distill it, in a very succinct point. I think one of the big mistakes is that when you just pack, both the board and the CEO, but especially the board, with just a ton of information and
Overload.
data. Yeah. And even if, like, you're trying to tell a different story every time, like if you're building, graphs and charts and they're inconsistent because there's a new story that you're trying to tell, it's very jarring, for the board to keep code switching. And so keep it to like what are the 2 or 3 things that you're going to want to convey.
Yes.
And as a
Yes.
matter of fact, I would say that, like, for everything that you're doing, be ready to answer, like, what are the top 2 or 3 things that you're prioritizing or that you want to convey? Because, I learned that specifically from one of our board members, the wonderful Steve Hammerschlag, who you can just count on him to be asking the questions based on the things that you just said. What are the 2 most important things that you're going to be doing to, address or drive, or what it is? So I think, and by the way, I think that really should be a quality of a good marketer anyway. You should be able to distill
Totally agree. Yes.
a complex story into a succinct, set of points that you want to convey.
Exactly, which is what you and I have done in our past lives, about taking complex topics and making them digestible, understandable, but also simple at the same time. So it's not complicated, and they can walk away going, I get it. 1, 2, maybe 3 priorities. People can generally remember 3 things, but anything more than that is just noise. So in terms of, like, building trust and credibility with the CEO and the board, I think that's currency for not just CMOs, leaders like yourself of commercial, other leaders across the organization. What are some of your recommended strategies for establishing trust with the CEO and the board? And I think I can think of, like, regular communication, but also, you mentioned this a minute ago, data-driven results, decision-making. What do you think folks should do strategically to establish that trust?
Yeah. So, I think it starts with the CEO, and I think, like, there's lots of things that can happen in terms of the CEO side. Number one is you need to be in constant communication with the CEO to make sure that you're aligned in terms of what the priorities are. Given that the CEO, especially if you're joining a company, probably has a lot more historical knowledge and insight into the needs of the business and so on, there's a lot that they can contribute in terms of, like, if they think you're going in the right direction or the wrong direction. So you want to be constantly testing that, and especially early on, making sure that, like, directionally, things are going that, they align, with and they make sense to the CEO, and that you're, working on doing that. I particularly like a couple of things, in that regard. Number one is being very proactive with what I would call, like, aha moments of insight with the CEO. So that means that, like, you're not waiting for the company or the CEO to, like, identify something and come to you. You're actively looking through your strategy, through your data, and getting insights that really unleash some sort of knowledge that, you can bring out, to the CEO and really highlight that, like, okay, you have a very good grasp and understanding of where the business stands. You have the ability to go in. I like to think that this, the heads of marketing should be. They don't necessarily need to be the ones wrangling the numbers, but they really should be, like, the best analysts on their teams if needed, or be able to direct the team to really be able to find those insights.
Yes.
And then when you do that proactively, like, it really builds trust
Yes.
in the business. And I can give you several examples that, from over the years. Like, there was one time where we were really struggling with like one specific channel, and it was really impacting a certain segment of the business. And sat down with my team and really did a deep analysis of like, okay, what is the challenge? And as we played with the data, it was pretty clear that there was one decision that we had made that had ignored a certain segment that needed attention, and that was the single biggest drop in the revenue was coming from that particular decision that we made. And so to be able to before you got to the board, before it got to the CEO, to be able to essentially kind of pull out that analysis, be able to proactively say, hey, this is what I found out why this area is a particular problem for us. And on top of that, be able to also say, and this is what we're going to do about it.
Yes.
Really helped, from the eyes of the CEO, establish the credibility that like, okay, this person, and this team know what they're doing. And of course, you're going to make mistakes, and
Sure.
it's not going to be perfect every time, but it's a really important component of it. Another area that I would focus on is, start with the early wins, like look, and especially as you're kind of diving deep into, where things are going, pick the area that you think is going to have like the most immediate impact. And it may not necessarily be the long-term strategic, the most important long-term thing that you're doing, but if you can show results early on, then it makes a massive difference, in terms of building that credibility and trust.
Absolutely. Yes. And like we said, credibility and trust are currency. You took the words right out of my mouth when you started talking about becoming proactive. Every leader, I imagine, CEO, board, beyond, doesn't want you to come to them with a problem. They want you to come with a solution. And being able to be proactive with that. I love your ideas about the quick early wins to show and demonstrate we're working on things that are leading us to our overall goal, that are leading the company to improve revenue. Question on communication. One of my marketing roles about 10, 11 years ago, I was running customer marketing for Tipco as a contractor. And the CMO said, over communicate. You really want people in the organization, especially sales channels, to understand what you're doing with the voice of the customer. What are your goals, guides for communication? Can you over communicate with a CEO and the board? Or is that over communication maybe one of those subtle strategic levers you should be pulling?
I think it really depends on the CEO and the board itself. I think it is possible to over communicate, but usually in the sense of if you're not telling a crisp, cohesive story that stands up to deep scrutiny,
Yeah.
But if you kind of have it distilled into the areas of focus, you have it's very clearly laid out with the strategic framework. There's numbers to back up the decisions. I think that level of communication is pretty important, and especially if there's certain things that you're trying to get an entire company aligned around, like a particular message around a particular initiative. It's important to keep harping the same message over and over. And so in that case, if it's not necessarily over communicating in terms of like just passing a lot of information, but it's communicating the same information over and over in different ways, so that it eventually internalizes, in the organization, and it becomes something that's just part of the innate fabric of everything that you're doing. So generally, to me, as long as that's always clear and there's clarity, and it starts fitting into everybody's mental model pretty easily, I think keep communicating that away.
But to your point, kind of also a marketer's foundational element is that consistent communication. So that the message is consistently delivered, so it's clear, and there is no concern of, wait a minute, what's their goal? What do you recommend for folks in terms of like using data? So one of the things I love about marketing, Rico, is that it's art, it's science, and there's different levers that we pull, and I kind of think of it not as a as a scale because it's
Mm-hmm.
never 50-50, but more as a pendulum swinging. What are
Mm-hmm.
some of the things that you've seen marketing leaders use to effectively measure and report on marketing success to CEOs and boards? What really resonates with them from a reporting or a dashboard perspective? I imagine keeping it simple is one of the keys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, so at the board level, typically you want to like, I'm trying to remember how many slides we have. It's just a couple slides that we
Yeah.
have on the marketing numbers. So it's, they care about pipeline, they care about bookings per channel, and so on, maybe a couple additional metrics, but it's only going to be a couple, key figures that you're going to keep coming back over and over, and they're going to want to see that chart going up into the right on a consistent basis. On the CEO side, I think, on the board side, I'd also say that these are more likely than not the hard metrics, the things that are easier to measure, quantitative, and so on. But as we know, marketing can be fuzzy, especially pretty on in the funnel, and when you're talking about branding and influence and things like that. And so I think those are conversations more at the CEO level. But I think what's really important is to really know the limitations of the data. That like, you're not positioning the data, especially where the data is has the potential to be, a little bit fuzzier in terms of areas of attribution or in terms of brand influence and things like that, you can present that data, but you really are able to hone in terms of like, what are the reality of the data and what are the limitations of what this data is telling you.
Yeah.
And then for those fuzzier areas, what really helps is to supplement with, at least anecdotes or, actual stories that, encompass the thing that you're trying to, tell in the first place, right? And so that means that like perhaps if it's a branding initiative, it's more on, look how much attention this has gotten here, or the discussion that has initiated, or this specific couple of deals that specifically mentioned that initiative in passing, or if it's a customer advocacy push, to look at like what level of engagement did we get from these advocates at some roadshow event that you're doing, or your rankings on G2 and Gartner Pure Insights and so on. I think that's really important, to be able to supplement the fuzzy data with anecdotes.
Agree. Well, it's really substantive to be able to substantiate what you're saying with those real world proof points that are showing the needle is moving in the direction of more revenue. Can you share any tactics for influencing? We've talked about communication. We've talked about leveraging data. We've talked about how to really understand what are the limitations with the data. How do we get around or clarify what might be fuzzy? But any tactics, Rico, that you have for influencing the CEO and the board, especially if you're looking to secure budget, talent to support marketing initiatives, what do you recommend folks do to really influence at this level?
Yeah. I think influence at the board level, I'll keep coming back to, make sure that you are aligned with the CEO. I think like the CEO, especially if they have a good relationship with the board, it is your ally, in that boardroom. And so if you can get a CEO aboard, chances are that, you're going to be able to make sure that the board is aligned with you as well. Now, in terms of influencing the CEO, I think, this is where you do have an opportunity to go with the deeper metrics, when appropriate. And so if you can show that, let's say if you're trying to secure, a level of funding or something like that, if you can show that there's early indications that, a certain initiative paid off or yielded some specific results, that you can highlight those as like, hey, you're never going to have perfect data, but here's some evidence to suggest from these early experiments that there were some tangible results that were gotten from it, even as fuzzy as they might be, that I think it's not a big risk for us, as a matter of fact, it's probably a likely opportunity for us to do these additional investments, and then you can build that case with just strong individual evidence that a CEO understanding that they have to move, and in a world of imperfect data, will likely be open to taking that leap of faith with you.
I think that's key in partnership, taking that leap of faith in partnership. Rico, I want to thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. You've done such a great job of explaining why, as a marketing leader, as the VP of commercial, where you are currently with Celigo, that why two of the most critical relationships that these leaders can have are with the CEO and the board. You've done a great job of explaining and clarifying what it is that the CEO is looking for, how you can align with them, how you can kind of double click on metrics and reports and data to demonstrate why you're looking for what you're looking for resource wise, and showing the results you're impacting, and then showing what it is that the board is interested in understanding from you, so that what you really have on both sides is alignment. I thank you so much for sharing and imparting your wisdom with our audience. I know they learned a ton. I know I learned a ton. And I think it's all about communication, building trust and credibility. Thank you so much for sharing everything that you did on the last 25 minutes. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
For Rico Andrade, I'm Lisa Martin. You've been watching CMOs Unscripted. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube, because every 2 weeks we have a new CMO marketing expert coming to you, sharing thought leadership on a variety of topics. And if you have a recommendation for a topic that you want one of our leaders to cover, DM us, send us a note. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.